Hey everybody, welcome to episode 3 of the Team Talley podcast, a parental, I blanked out and forgot the title of the show, but it's the, uh, what was it called? Parental pilgrimage with a microbreeding. There we go, okay.
Yeah.
It's been a day. I had jury duty today and I had to sit around all day doing nothing, so I'm a little out of it. Stephanie's here with me, of course, my wife,
Hey guys.
mother of all my children, including Talley. It's been a pretty busy couple of weeks since we recorded the last episode. I thought this week would be a good time to talk about the weaning process. Talley came home from the hospital still on oxygen. And so thought we would talk about just dealing with the oxygen in general and what it was like weaning her off at home. I know when we first started this journey, I don't really think it was expected on my part. I can't speak for you, Stephanie, but I didn't realize that they kind of figured that she would be on oxygen still when she came home.
I don't think that she was expected to be on oxygen when she came home until she had her setback with the ROP surgery.
Well, I mean, from their perspective, though, the oxygen's not a reason to keep her.
Right.
And a lot of babies in her situation are still on the oxygen when they go home.
Right.
So it wasn't necessarily... I mean, we always hope she wasn't going to be, but I think they always just kind of prepare for that possibility. But I know I wasn't quite prepared for it, so the first time they told us, hey, she's probably still going to be on oxygen when she goes home, I was like, what?
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, it was scary, really, is what it was, because that seems like a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I think at first a lot of the nurses didn't expect her to go home on oxygen, but we had the relapse and we had to get intubated again, and we had to start over again on our intubation process. So I think that's what set us up for the at-home oxygen care. I think if we wouldn't have had the relapse in the intubation process from the ROP surgery, we probably would have came home with no oxygen support. But it was almost not quite ground zero, but we did go back on the ventilator and had to start weaning her off the ventilator all over again. But it never occurred to me when we first started the process that she would come home on oxygen. I never was a thought in my head. I didn't realize that was something that happened. A lot of things you didn't realize happen until you're in this journey.
Yeah, that's kind of how it was for me too. Never even considered the possibility. You know, we assume from the parent side they're going to stay there until they're ready to come home. And from our perspective, ready to come home means not needing the oxygen too.
Right. And I guess if you think about it, even a person who is elder, or, has lung conditions, they can be at home on oxygen. So, being out of the situation, looking into it, it doesn't seem that uncommon for people to milk oxygen at home. But when it's your preemie baby, it seems very uncommon and something that they don't really prepare you for before you leave the hospital.
They definitely don't prepare you for it. Mm-hmm. In fact, I remember the day that the home health guy came in with the oxygen equipment, gave us his crash course on it. Basically, the only reference we were going to have was us making a video recording of him showing us how to use it. And we watched that again 3 or 4 times after I got the equipment home so I could figure out how to set it up. It's like, he said to do this, right? Let me watch the video again. and that
Yeah,
was
I
it.
mean, they gave us a phone number that we could call if we had any issues or any troubles, but it wasn't like someone came to our house and set it up for us. We brought the stuff home and we set it up on our own. And we obviously got it set up because she got to come home.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was kind of, I thought more maybe we would have someone come in from home health and set it up for us to make sure everything was set up correctly, but no, they let us video our demonstration of how to set it up at home ourselves.
Yeah, at least Lowe's set up our new fridge.
Yeah.
So at least that was, they did that. There was also some learning curve, I feel like, with the oxygen equipment. It's my first time using it. And I know it was yours too. It fortunately wasn't that hard. It was a big roller unit. So with the right extension cord, we could roll it around the house wherever we needed. I'm glad it was that instead of the big metal tanks. Because that's what you think about when you say, oh, she was on oxygen. You think about the big tank you have to pull around with you. Not that
Yeah.
we weren't, we had those for traveling. Don't think we didn't have them.
Yeah, I mean, the at home stuff wasn't too bad. We could wheel it around to whatever. When we were in, we had extension cords and extenders for the tubing, but it was a whole nother struggle whenever we had to leave the house, which is one of the reasons why we probably didn't leave the house as much as we would have with a new baby you bring home without oxygen support, is because it's not easy to go somewhere when you have a tank and a monitor on top of your everyday supplies just to take your newborn somewhere. So,
Yeah.
the oxygen wasn't the only reason. It's also because it was COVID and a premature baby being in the hospital coming home that we stayed home a lot. But I think once we got off the oxygen, we definitely started going back to some of our normal routines.
Yeah, it was basically the monitor was a box about this big. It ran on batteries, so we could take it pretty easily with us. But that's connected to a sensor on her foot, so we had that. We had the oxygen tank connected to the little hose under her nose. We had the diaper bag. We had her in the big, carry the baby around car seat. So it was a challenge for sure getting around. I was very thankful. Looking back at the experience, I was really thankful that they gave us the handicapped placard.
Yeah, but they didn't even offer that to us when we came home. We didn't get that till after we were home for a while and gone back to the NICU clinic for an evaluation. So we had already gone to several doctor's appointments and several grocery stores or wherever we went in between then without it. But it did make life a lot easier when we got it, because we were able to get a closer spot with more room in between cars to get things in and out of the vehicle. So if you're not aware your baby comes home on oxygen, you would be able to get a temporary handicap sticker. It wasn't like a permanent. I think ours expired in January, but it was a very nice bonus to have whenever you're hauling all that stuff around.
Yeah, it's a little thing, really, but in the grand scheme, it was pretty big help. So it probably took a while to get the hang of coordinating all of that stuff. You get to where you can kind of just sling everything around and drag her wherever you're trying to go, and it gets a little easier. I'd say one of the big challenges too was even just knowing how to keep an eye on her with the equipment, because because she was on oxygen the way she was, they classified her as chronic lung disease, which really doesn't mean anything.
The chronic lung disease comes in from being intubated for so long. It causes damage to their lungs from having the intubation tube in for so long, which is what causes them to need prolonged oxygen or can lead to asthma or things like that in the future that might require a pulmonologist. Which they say is very common for the preemies once again because of the intubation, and most of the preemies will grow out of their chronic lung disease. And thankfully, Tally hasn't had any more major issues, we don't have to be followed by a pulmonologist.
Right. We're still dealing with the asthma part. It's a process to get a diagnosis for asthma anyway, because they basically make you have a few attacks before they'll give you a diagnosis and start saying, okay, you can have the inhaler, you can have this. And we had to go through the same stuff with Miles too, though. So it's kind of helpful for her to just come at it from the idea that she's definitely going to have it.
Yeah, I think our pediatrician, now that we have a family history of it and the beginning stages that she had with birth and the chronic lung disease in the past, that I think she's going to be more, I don't know if open's the right word to it, but maybe quicker to have a diagnosis. With Miles, I think he's 3 and we just got a diagnosis because we were waiting for the seasons to come and go so they could confirm that that's what the problem was. So
maybe a little looser with the diagnosis and with the inhalers. It took us till just recently to even get Miles the nebulizer, which is crazy.
yeah, and I mean, even with Talley, our inhalers come from the ER, and the nebulizer for Miles came from the urgent care, not from our pediatrician, which we love our pediatrician. But when Miles first started showing signs of asthma was with COVID, and so they were more hesitant to do the nebulizers for people who weren't having COVID issues. So maybe they're still coming off those type of things. I'm not sure.
Their attitude was if you hit the inhaler, like 5 or 6 times, then it's the equivalent of the nebulizer treatment. But it's not. The nebulizer treatment's hitting it all at once, and I feel like it's a lot more effective for Miles anyway. Then, plus, the inhaler tastes bad, so it's really hard to get him to sit still for that many.
True.
When he'll sit still for the nebulizer a lot better. Maybe an adult can sit there and just suck on the inhaler for the entire day or whatever they need to do, but a 3-year-old's not. So we're at least now we know kind of the process, and I do agree. I love our pediatrician, but she's sometimes very by the book, and as parents, we want to bypass the book sometimes.
I mean, as parents, we think that we always know best, and I would say probably most of the time we know our children more than anyone else, but at the same point, we have to trust our doctors too.
And our doctor listens, and she does take our concerns under advisement. She talks to us about them, so that's I really don't know what else we could ask for as far as that goes.
I don't know.
So just sometimes they take a little arm twisting.
Yeah.
To get to skip a couple of pages in the book. Which, if you have to do that, you do it. Because we've definitely learned in this process to advocate for the kids, medically speaking.
I mean, we've never had to, seriously advocate. It's just even the small things when it comes to appointments needed, but they're booked up. You have to just take the time out of your day and stay on top of them and call them and see if they have any openings coming or if, anything. Because while the hospitals and the doctors mean well, they also are a business and they're running their schedule. And so they're not going to keep on top of their schedule for your child. You have to keep on top of their schedule for your child.
And from a doctor perspective, really, they have to lean more conservatively with what they tell you, what they give you. They don't want to just start throwing everything at you either. I get that. So sometimes, you just have to express your concern, and they'll try and meet you where they can with it because they're constrained too, can only do so much.
Right.
I will say we got very good at doing the tape for her nasal tube. That that was a fun experience.
Yeah.
She was very good at ripping it off her face, and I think she enjoyed it.
Tally was really good at taking anything off that she didn't want. She ripped her feeding tube out. She ripped the intubation tube out. I mean, I'm sure it was not comfortable for her little face to have that stuff on it 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
So,
And I know if you don't have any, they use it at the hospital. It's these little wipes, like alcohol wipes or something like that, that you rub on there to loosen the adhesive, the tape. Lifesavers. They have them at the hospital. See if they'll give you some to take with you. If not, or even if you need more, they're on Amazon. They're pretty cheap and they're worth it. I think you probably paid like for that package, that big box, it's probably like $15.
yeah, I don't remember how much it costs, but I mean, their skin does get irritated from having tape on it, and those little cloths and wipes are really were very helpful. You're not just tearing skin off her; you're taking it and gently taking it back, step by step, to put a new tape on there.
Yeah, so that's definitely worth having. Uh, when it actually came time to wean her, I know, first of all, we were up in the air as to when we should actually even start. Because I think it was like her 2 month follow up. They told us that her oxygen level was fine. We could start weaning whenever we wanted. It's like when?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly when the follow up appointment was. It was right. It was after we came home from the NICU because I was still off work when this happened, and they don't send you home with a book saying if your child has stayed at this level for so many days, let's try to wean her down or anything like that. They just, at the NICU follow-up clinic, were seeing how well she was doing and without it, so they told us just to start. But again, they don't give you any type of guidance on how much to wean at one time, or what to look for if you're weaning and things aren't going well. Or what to do even if she does crash. You're just kind of left to figure out on your own. And I do not have a medical degree, and I've never had a baby on oxygen in the hospital or outside the hospital before Tally. So it's just a whole new experience for both of us and all of our family and everyone who has opinions on how things should be done. And I think this might have been some of the more complicated conversations we had to have because we weren't always on the same page as far as how much weaning we should do, how fast we should do it. And we also obviously had other people's inputs that kind of could throw a winch in our plans that weren't medical doctors either.
And
But
the downside with that too is we didn't really know much more than any of them did either.
right.
So their opinions, while maybe didn't carry as much weight as ours just because we're the ones here, it's still, valid opinions that we had to consider too. We just worked them into our own calculus, and we just really had to decide what we were comfortable with. Obviously, she was a little more conservative about how fast she wanted to go, and I wanted to go a little faster, not because I thought she could handle it. And we just kind of had to talk it out and decide on something we were both comfortable with. That's a big thing to really make sure that you actually communicate these kinds of things, because nobody expects everybody to agree. But we had to come up with a plan that we felt would work for her, that we were both comfortable with. And we ultimately ended up, I think we started out just doing like an hour off at a time.
Yeah.
We kept the sensors on her so we could make sure that she wasn't dropping. And even then, it was hard to tell really how she was doing because those sensors, as she got bigger, I guess it was because she moved so much, they just weren't very accurate.
Yeah, they didn't want to stay in place as often. My big concern with everything when it comes to the medical aspect of her development is that I don't want to rush her to that we go and take 10 steps backwards, because any of you that have been in the NICU or had any type of experience with this knows that you can be on a high, and then it can just be pulled right out from underneath you and you go back to ground zero. So I never want to rush her, as medically speaking. So I was definitely way more conservative with the weaning of the oxygen, because I could not have gone back to the hospital that soon with having issues because we took things too fast. So I was definitely the more conservative, and I had to, we had to have conversations and voice our opinions and meet in the middle, because it's just a lot to try to learn when you've never done it before, and then you don't really have a lot of medical guidance on what to look for. Because even our pediatrician, I would ask her, and she would say, you might want to call the NICU or the doctors at the hospital, because that's not her expertise. She's not a NICU doctor, and she's not a doctor of weaning babies off oxygen. She's a pediatrician who sees the babies when they come home from the hospital. So I feel like we're talking about our pediatrician a lot. She really is a great doctor, and I'd recommend her to anybody. But the oxygen weaning, thank the Lord that we only had our oxygen probably for 2 months when we came home. And she was on the very minimum settings the whole time, and we only had a few episodes where she desatted or dipped down lower than where she should have been. But I think that was probably the hardest. We even kept the equipment in the house until probably December, even though she was well off in October, because RSV season is coming, flu season was coming, and we were told that a lot of times when the babies that were oxygen dependent get sick, they'll have a tendency to go back and need it. And so we wanted to keep it as long as possible just as a backup plan. So, but thank the Lord, thank God, we have not had to use oxygen since
She even
we
got
named her.
RSV too.
She didn't get RSV.
But she did.
No, Miles did.
That's still okay.
We were also fortunate with RSV that we got the Synagis shot because of her low birth weight, and we got that every month during the whole first RSV season, which I have to imagine that kept her from getting RSV, so coming home.
Yeah, that was definitely a huge help. And I will say, too, that we still kept the sensors on her after she was completely off the oxygen, probably for at least a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and then once we couldn't take the sensors anymore because they just would go off every time she would move her legs, we used the outlet sock, which I think we mentioned before that our friends had got us at with Miles. And so we were still able to let her sleep with that monitor on, but not have to have the huge sensor set up that every time an alarm went off, we were waking up. It was just going to our phone, and it wasn't as loud and obnoxious.
Yeah. So those outlet socks are awesome, by the way. They're a little pricey, but they're worth it. So make sure that you don't have one, or if you're expecting, put it on the registry. Definitely.
There's a little, I guess, controversy with them because I guess they're not backed by the FDA, or I'm not sure what all the controversy is, but I see it on the NICU pages that I'm on. But we really found peace in ours. Like, even when Miles was a baby and he got the RSV, we were able to use it and keep track of him. And I don't know what all the controversy is, but we liked ours and we used it for both our babies.
I feel like it worked as well as the medical sensors did.
Mm-hmm.
Better even, because it didn't move so easily.
Yeah.
Now it did. If she was too wiggly, it didn't work.
Yeah.
But when we were still in that first couple of weeks without the oxygen on her and without the home health sensors. We didn't even keep the sock on her every night, but we'd still put it on there just for the peace of mind that we could check. And it's like she's been quiet for a while. Do we want to go in and wake her up or just check the sock?
Right.
So we could just check in now and again and make sure that her oxygen level was high enough, which it was. So it's definitely, it's probably, since we came home, it's probably the hardest experience we've had on top of the process itself, but us just trying to deal with it as, I guess, civilians and not medically trained people. It was crazy is what it was. Looking back, it was actually, it went pretty well.
Yeah, in the moment, it just, in the moment of the whole process, everything is hard. Looking back at a lot of things, you could say, oh, that wasn't so bad. Or, you know, we were fortunate that we came home before our due date. Or, you know, we were fortunate that she came on minimal oxygen support. Because I've seen a lot of other babies who have to get trachs and things like that. So we are fortunate. And looking back, it seems like it was so long ago. In reality, it wasn't. And we were blessed that we've only gone back to the hospital one time since we left the NICU, and that was for a little tad bit of pneumonia, and we got a breathing treatment and came home. So, looking back now, she's done amazing and she's done great. And I have to remind myself a lot that where we were, where we've come from, and where we are, because even when it comes to milestones, I still find myself, it must just be human nature, thinking, well, she's not doing what she's supposed to be doing, or she's not doing what Miles did, or she's not doing what this other baby's doing. But in all reality, she's on her own time schedule and she's doing amazing. So,
Yep. And you can't tell that she ever had any issues with her lungs or with breathing because she's the loudest kid in the house.
she's very vocal.
She's very vocal.
She comes
She's learned that she can yell for stuff. She just yells at you. She doesn't even cry. It's just yelling.
She definitely comes from a long line of loud females. So, it's to be expected for her. She has to be able to voice her opinion.
Loud, opinionated, and stubborn mixture from both sides. So we're probably in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. She's going to be tough. She already is tough.
She's the toughest one in the house, and she knows it. And she's very demanding of what she wants. If she decides she wants something, she's just yells. Honestly, it's hilarious.
Yeah.
I can't help but encourage it just a little bit. Like, yes, yell all you want. And then send you to Mom's house. You can yell over there. Is there anything else you want to throw in before we wrap it up for this week?
I don't think so. I mean, I hope that what we're doing is helping at least one person out there. Seems a little crazy that we're putting our story out there for other people to hear, but I know when I was in the moment that if I could have heard some, and I did hear positive stories. I'm not saying I didn't hear positive stories, but it's always nice to have someone that can relate to what you're going through. So we'll try again next in a couple weeks and see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I agree. And if you ever feel like you're alone, there's somebody around you that's was a preemie or knows somebody that was a preemie that was in the NICU that can share their story with you. You'd be surprised. Just since we had this experience ourselves, you find out, oh, this person I know was a preemie, or this person's kid was a preemie, and it's amazing how many people you didn't have any idea. And that's actually a source of comfort for me. It was, especially at the beginning, because these people I had no idea. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That means they overcame whatever challenges they had, and they're fine.
Um, One last little plug. September is NICU Awareness Month, and September 30th is Wear Green Day for all the NICUs out there. So,
Yay!
you want to support your local NICUs.
Yes, and I always try to plug the March of Dimes to you. They always raise money to try and do more research into pregnancies and moms and babies and getting to full term deliveries. So, never a bad cause to support if you need one to support. So, they help a lot of hospitals. They don't like just go around handing out money. They're like funding research and studies into keeping those babies where they're supposed to be. So I think that's all we got for this week. Like I said, you need support. Don't be afraid to ask. You can hit us up. You can just ask people you know. Nobody knows more than you do, even if that's not much. So never be afraid to talk about how you feel. This is going to be it. So thanks for joining us. I hope you got something out of this. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and like and subscribe the video. If you're just listening to the audio, feel free to follow so you get the new episodes automatically downloaded. And we'll see you next week or 2 weeks from Team Talley. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys. See you later.